Hello, welcome to Inky Art Lab. In today's video, we're going to explore transparency in watercolor using the three little paintings here. One of the reasons that first drew me to watercolor is its beautiful transparency. It allows layers of color shine through one another, gives you a feeling of depth, light, and also softness. For the first piece, I'm gonna show you how to draw the shapes of leaves. Let's start with a long curved line that is going to be the stem. Then add leaves on both sides in a symmetric way. One thing to remember is that we're going to paint two layers of leaves. So for each layer, arrange the leaves however you like. Just make sure they're spaced out evenly and don't overlap. For the paint, we're going to use transparent watercolor for this exercise. You can pick any color you like. Just avoid the ones that are super light, such as the flesh tone, as they won't show up as well on the paper. Just in case that you don't know, not all the color paints are transparent. Some are semi-transparent, and some are actually opaque. For example, I have this set from Royal Talents. It's actually labeled as opaque watercolor on the box. The texture and feeling of this set is actually quite a lot like gouache. So if you happen to have a box like this, let's save it for another time. For my first little painting, I picked a transparent red oxide from Turner. If you're not sure whether your paints are transparent or not, take a look at the label on the tube. See this tiny symbol? Grade A means it's super transparent. It should be perfect for layering. Different brands have their own ways of showing transparency. See this little square which is half filled on this tube of Van Gogh watercolor? It means this tube is semi-transparent. Sometimes you won't be able to find any information of transparency, not even on this artist grade of watercolor coming from Daniel Smith. In that case, you'll want to go to their website to check for more information. Or you can simply try this tube for a few times, make different tests to see how it comes out, which is the fun of watercolor anyway. Okay, let's come back to the paint we chose. I'm going to make two shades with it. For the first shade, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of water to give it a rich and dense texture. And for the second shade, I'm going to add more water to give it a softer and more transparent look. Here, I'm taking a piece of scrap watercolor paper to test the two shades I just made. The lighter one and the darker one. If you ever need to cut your own watercolor paper and therefore have some scrap paper lying around, don't throw them away. They could come really handy. What I have here is the basic layout of the first little painting. We're going to have two layers. For both layers, there are long branches and leaves that growing in a symmetric way. You can draw the branches as straight lines or as curves. It's totally up to you. I'm using the softer or the diluted shades to paint the first layer. The point of this exercise is to learn about the transparency of watercolor, so take your time and feel how the water flows. Just a quick tip here, in watercolor, often of the times we start from the lighter shades and then gradually move to the darker shades. Because if you start with the darker shades and then do lighter washes over it, the color may be washed off. And this is especially true if you're using a student-grade watercolor paper, or if you're using an artist-grade watercolor paper, but you have stored it for quite a long time, like 3 or 5 years. The coating on that paper may fall off, making it harder to do the layering that we're going to do today. Just in case if you're interested, yes, there are ways to repair those watercolor paper with their coatings already coming off. We'll talk about it in a different video, so make sure you subscribe to get all the updates. Now come back to our painting. We want to paint the leaves and branches in a way so they cover the whole picture without leaving too much empty spaces, and while still keeping the sense of natural rhythm and variations. I know I have said a lot, but don't panic. The point of doing watercolor is to enjoy the process and having fun, not about being perfect. While we wait for the first layer to dry, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the color mixing process. Most of the time, I just dilute the paints with water on the tip of my brushes. But if you feel that's not precise, here are a few handy tools that you can use. One is to use a water dropper. You can use either a glass one or a plastic one like this. The second way is to use a syringe. If you can find a tiny one like this, its full capacity is only 1 ml. So each time you can add a tiny little bit of water, far less than even a droplet. Now it's time to check if the first layer is dried up already. I'm using a paper towel and gently tap on the painting. See the paints here? It means I'll need to wait longer. Once it's all dried up, we're ready to paint the second layer of leaves. Still the same shapes, but with the darker shades we made at the very beginning. You'll see how the top layer interacting with the layer underneath. Because watercolor is so transparent, the colors below still show through, and that creates this nice feeling of depth and softness. It's one of the things that make watercolor so special. You don't really have to mix every color on your palette. Even with just one tube of paint, you can create a whole range of depth by just adding more layers gently. For this layer, we also want to arrange the leaves in a way that feels natural and balanced, kind of scattered but with intention. Think of it like how leaves would grow, some overlapping, some spaced apart, creating a nice rhythm and flow. For the paper, I am using Archie's cold pressed paper, which has a medium coarse texture. It holds up really well to layering. And Archie's in fact make the best paper that I have ever used. If you are using student watercolor paper, when you paint the top layer, you may notice that some of the color from the first layer lifts a little bit when you add the second one. That is totally normal and nothing to worry about. It can even add a nice texture sometimes. In fact, the practice that we're doing today will help you get familiar with the paper that you're using and better understand how it reacts to water and layering. So go with the flow and enjoy the process. Now the first picture is done. You can see how beautiful the two layers work together. The soft overlapping of colors adds such a gentle depth. It's a simple but useful exercise. The more you play with it, the more control and confidence you will gain with watercolor. For the second painting, we're going to have more freedom. We're going to pick any two colors that you think will go well with each other and mix them. Here I picked the Prussian blue and magenta red. I mixed them to get a beautiful purplish tone. After adding some water to dilute it, I'm using this light and purplish shade to paint some leaves. This time I want it to be a little different, so I am using a more oval-like shapes for the leaves. You can also pick any leaf shapes that you like. While the leaves are still wet, I am adding more pure color to the leaves by using my brush tip and just gently give it a touch of either Prussian blue or magenta red. In this way, we're making the colors of the leaves more vibrant. After the first layer is completely dry, we're going to use the same technique for the top layer, just with less water on my brush and therefore a richer and deep color. With the wet on wet technique, I'm also adding red and Prussian blue to the leaves, so the colors can dance. In the last piece, we're going to paint the flower. The basic shape will be quite similar to that of water lily. The overlapping part between the petals is where all the interest come in. Two transparent layers will come together at those places and create all the magic. Then we also have the base of the flowers and simple leaves. For the first wash, I used the magenta red, mixed with some flesh tone. The reason that I added a flesh tone to it is because I don't want the colors to look too saturated. And I'm using that color to paint the petals that are not next to each other. That means some petals are missing here, and we'll save them for the second layer. By using the purple shade we made in the second painting, I'm making the tip of each petal a little bit darker so they don't look too flat. When this layer is dried up, I'm adding a second layer. See how beautiful it turns out. Then, with olive green, I'm painting the simple flower base, along with the stem and two pieces of leaves. I chose to add some veins to the leaves to give them more interest. And this is completely up to you for your project. Sometimes we want more details, sometimes we don't. Just to remember one thing, art doesn't always have to be photorealistic. The way you observe and the way you suggest the forms, movement, and the feelings is just as meaningful. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe for more art tips and tutorials. See you next time!